Well, okay. So, welcome back to another edition of Corey's Unnamed Book Review Show. Confusing book reviews. I don't know what we're calling this, but yeah, it's been, I guess, 3 weeks since I did my last batch. So, I just wanted to do like a quick update, and I'll probably do that at the start of each of these. So, we're going to do another batch. So you're going to see, like, for the next couple of weeks, you're going to see me wearing this. I don't wear the same thing every day. We're recording it all at once. But I think we're going to do a little bit of format change. I think we've been doing like 3 books. Probably going to go up to 4 books. That way I could just batch them off, just to make it easy for me to think. And I'm also going to start teasing the next one of the next month's books at the end of the book review. So I've got to get this spill cleaned up. We've got to say this like two more times. Okay, so yeah. So, I don't know what I'm doing. We'll figure it out together. But yeah, so here's our next book review right now. So, we're going to start with this one because this is the meaty one. Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. It's a winner of Nobel Prize in Economics. So this is a psychology book. And for those of you who know me and my opinion on psychology, the fact that I'm reading this book is probably shocking. So, yeah. I came to this book because I went on, like, I don't know if you've been paying attention, but I kind of been on a productivity kick. And I think we're about halfway through the productivity guru books that I bought. I think I bought like a dozen or something. It was something ridiculous. So we're after we get done with this batch, we'll be like halfway through that initial batch of book, and no more productivity after that. We'll figure out a different nonfiction category to sprinkle throughout. And coming up, we will also be doing some classics and probably some modern books, just modern reading. So maybe was it 50 Shades of Grey? Maybe we'll read that. I don't know. But yeah, so we'll throw in some modern stuff, some classics, and then it won't be all nonfiction like it has been. So yeah, the book Thinking Fast and Slow. I came across this because all of the booktube people, productivity guru people on YouTube kept talking about this book, and it was showing up on Amazon like all the time. Every time I go to order a book, it would be up there. Hey, you should read this. Blah blah blah. It's a fairly substantial volume. Of course, I got the hardcover. It lays. I mean, it's pretty decent, right? It's pretty flat. It's not bad. I enjoyed reading the book even for hardcover because the reason why I show that is because sometimes hardcovers are really stiff and they don't lay flat, and it's annoying to read. You're like doing this. Ugh. You gotta push read the page because that's as far as you can get above. Nobody wants that. So, this was a decent. I found it comfortable to read even though the hardcover. So, yeah. $35. I really need to pay attention to how much these books cost. It's an expensive hobby, apparently. It's simultaneously the most expensive hobby if you're buying like all hardcovers, and also the least expensive if you're going to the library, like any sane individual that doesn't have the need to collect books, hardcover books. So, yeah. I want to be 80 years old and in my lounge, my office, just surrounded by books, grandkids. "Hey there, Grandpappy, have you read all these books?" And I'm like, "I sure have." It's not gonna happen. Let me dream. So yeah, it is. Close to 500 pages, but about the last 10 or 15% of it is appendix. So this right here, this part is appendix. So it's mostly that's all just like references and stuff that I never got around to reading. This is not a quick read. It's a good book. Let's just put that out front. It's a very interesting book, very thought-provoking book. But it is. There's always sometimes popular science books can either go one or two directions. One, they get really too technical, and it gets bogged down into the technical. Like if you read anything like by Roger Penrose or something, like in the popular physics or whatever, by Roger Penrose. I got one of the books, Road to Reality, and that book was a slog. This is closer to that. Very interesting. And a lot of people recommend it. Maybe it's just me, but I got bogged down and I could not go more than a chapter a day, which is atrociously slow for me. I usually, I don't hold myself to it, but I usually try to get read one book a week. That's the goal. I don't stress if I don't hit it, but this thing took like a month, 6 weeks or something. Especially once I got to the middle part, he goes through everything. The initial thesis, you go through that really quickly, and then he goes through and just like you set up your thesis, and then you do your supporting arguments. And that's basically what he does, is he goes through and lists every single supporting argument for his thesis, how it plays out from his he's got this two-system model of thinking. There's a fast, quick assessment system that is mostly accurate, but sometimes like wildly inaccurate. And then there's the slow system that is more methodical, but is rarely used. It's usually either the first system tries to trick the second system into not being activated or something like that. Yeah. So the system A and system B. That's the thinking fast and slow. That's the fast system and the slow. So fast system would be like catching the ball or whatever. And then slow would be calculating a trajectory, that kind of stuff. I am not going to be able to make the arguments of this book. I will not be able to summarize it for you. It is technical. It's good. You don't need to be like a psychology. You don't need to be super smart to read it. I'm just saying that it takes a while to get through all of the details. I found that I got maybe a third of the way through it, and he started elaborating on all of the systems and how they arrived at the supporting evidence for that conclusion of why he thinks things work the way that he's saying that it works. All of it's backed up by, at least cited by him, is backed up by research. In particular ways, cites people and research and the appendix and all that jazz. And this dude is a Nobel whatever guy. I mean, that doesn't mean he's not full of shit, but I mean, it's a pretty decent quality indicator. So, he goes through, and then about a third of the way book, and then from there on out, I was like at a chapter a night, and I would just be, and it could have just been I was stressed at work or something or whatever, and I just every night I would get to read it, and I would be just trying to get to the end of the chapter so I could, like, okay, I got I got my reps in for the night. And that's about all I could do for weeks. There's, I think, 20 something like 38 chapters, 39 chapters, 38 chapters. Yeah. And I'd say from like chapter 10 on, it was just like one chapter at a time. There is a lot of interesting things. The thing is, this would be a book that I would probably have to sit. I would have to sit on for a while and come back to. Meaning, like, I read the book, but I don't know how much of it I absorbed because it's, like I said, it's dense. I mean, when I say dense, I don't mean it's hard to read. I mean, there's so much to unpack and figure out how that works, like in practice, like in my own life or in my own experience. So it's really, I had a hard time translating what was being written into my own experience and unwrapping it. And I could only do that like at a chapter at a time. But even then it was very, very poor. I think most of the chapters, vast majority of the chapters, I would say, I've kind of mostly forgotten what was actually said. I'm sure if I read it again, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember what he was saying there. But the point is, you're going to see a bunch of people saying to read this book, but it's not a quick read. This is not light reading. It's not scientific reading, meaning it's not technical reading. He does cite some stuff for you to go peruse further, but it's not like you need to be a psychology major or even just be scientifically minded. It is worded in layman's terms, and I think understandable in those terms, but he does a good job of putting it in everyday language, but it's a really dense topic that takes a while to unravel everything, what it means. I might have even said that you should probably skip this book. But I think there's probably at least one chapter for many people that's really going to resonate with you about some flaw in your thinking that you may have not considered before. And for me, I had a huge aha moment. I was like, oh wait, that's really freaking valuable. So he goes into, and in this particular, I forget, he has names for all of this stuff, and honestly the details aren't important, but it's explaining it, there was basically a fallacy. You could think of it as a fallacy, logical fallacy that was being broken, mental fallacy. There was mental trap or mental bias. Yeah, I guess that would be a mental bias, psychological bias. That he was in play with, and then he gets near the end of the chapter and he talks about strategies about how to interrupt these patterns and stuff like that and avoid falling into the traps. And one of the thing that like rung the bell for me was when he talked about the concept of a pre-mortem. So I do a lot of project work. So, we'll have a project that we're going to build up, and we'll have to scope it and estimate it and talk with the client and plan it all out and everything. And then we execute it and then we get it done. And a lot of times we'll do a post-mortem to say, okay, well, what did we do good? What did we do bad? How can we do better? That's normal, the post-mortem. That's what all the it's real trendy in tech circles to do a post-mortem on a project or something. So we'll commonly do that. At least I'll do that myself. I'll be thinking, well, we didn't do that quite right. Maybe we can do something a little bit better. But he introduced the topic of my leg's shaking, and so it's shaking you guys because I'm getting fidgety. ADD kicking in. I don't know if I have ADD. Who knows? So he mentions the concept of a pre-mortem, which I found just like, boom, that was a big idea. If there was nothing else in this book that was of any value, that I think that pre-mortem, if I could keep that stuck in my head to remember to do a pre-mortem, that would be hugely beneficial. So the idea of the pre-mortem prevents you from getting into yes mode. So there's always like a phase when you're planning a project, and you've been planning and planning and planning, and there gets a point early on. You can say no to stuff. You can say, well, this project didn't work because we did this, and we can cancel the project like outright because it's very early and we have very little investment. It's also kind of related to the sunk cost fallacy. But after you get further into the planning phases and you're estimating things and you're talking and hashing out with the clients, eventually everybody's all invested in trying to get the project off the floor. And like, say you've been in rounds for 2 months back and forth, and you've been doing meetings like twice a week with the client or whatever, and you get to a point where you just want to say yes. Everybody wants to say yes because you don't want to be the one who says, well, there's this problem and that's the thing that's going to like, and you don't even see it. You don't even think about the problems anymore. You're just trying to figure out how to get to yes at that point. And so the whole idea of the pre-mortem is after you have finally agreed that the plan, you have a plan, you have your estimate, and you have agreement over whatever, if you're working with a client or something, you have some sort of agreement and everybody's on board. Before you do the final commitment, you all go, everybody, all the stakeholders involved, say, okay, if we were to look at our project in 6 months, a year, or whatever, and we could imagine the things that had gone wrong in the future, had gone wrong, that would totally kill this project or make it a pain or whatever, what would those things be? And have everybody go through and come up, just like be creative and come up with things that would have killed the project or been, huge stumbling blocks for the project. And by having everybody do it, you're talking, negatively or whatever, you have that final check that says, okay, maybe somebody's brought up a really valid point that nobody was, that maybe somebody was afraid to say up until now, either because maybe they were afraid or maybe nobody was thinking, because again, you're trying to get to yes. And I had a project this last year, I guess. Was it last year? Yeah, last year we were planning a project, and we went back and forth with the client a lot, trying to get a scope. And initially I was just really trying to nail down. It's like, let's make sure we're doing it. I was trying to limit the scope, limit the amount of things that we were committing to doing as much as possible. But the client kept pushing. Everybody was wanting to get this off the ground. The client she was like, well, we'll do this and we won't have to worry about that. And, absolving me of my guilt in the back of my mind. And eventually, I guess probably a month or two goes on, and then finally, I'm like, okay, yeah, I think we might be able to do this. But if I was being really honest, if we had stopped at that point, we had made the agreement and everything, and then we said, okay, what's the pre-mortem? I would have been able to go right back to all those initial problems that I had initially outlined that we still hadn't actually resolved, and maybe the project's fine, but it was a lot rougher than it probably should have been, if we had been very clear about that, and we had that pre-mortem. And this isn't the only project that this has happened on. It's happened, a few times with different clients, where you just get to a point where you're more trusting the clients. I'm trying to think of the right word. You're more trusting in the relationship with the client and the relationship with the project, the familiarity with the project, than on its technical merits. The actual constraints. I'm like, we've got 6 months of work to do in 3 months. I mean, that's just not feasible, right? We need to cut scope, and there's just no two ways about it. Things like that. That was a huge bombshell. Whenever I read it, I was like, oh wow, that's huge to be able to put that in explicit terms and say, okay, this is going to be a explicit part of our process when we're doing planning, is we'll get to the end stage and then we'll do explicit pre-mortem. So I go, all right, how can this screw up? We may have mentioned some of this stuff before, but how can this screw up? Is it still an issue, or should we still proceed? Basically, how do we undo all of this planning that we've been doing? That we hyped ourselves up for this thing. Let's unhype ourselves. I think it's a fantastic idea. And that was the thing that was like a lightning bolt whenever I read it, and made slogging through this thing, because I'll be honest, like I got about halfway through this book and I was like, let it end. But that's me, because I hate psychology, guys. I hate it. I hate it. Psychology and nutrition. I mean, there's two sciences that I do not have very much respect for. And economics, psychology, nutrition, and economics. They all involve humans. I wonder why I don't trust it. It's because the science is crap. But it was a good book. I don't know how much of it is bullshit, but that one idea of the pre-mortem I really loved. And for that alone, I will actually recommend the book. Have I ever not recommended a book? How did I think about it? Maybe I just love everything I read. So Thinking Fast and Slow Down. Let me do the spill. We'll read a little bit from the cover here. Let's just read this. Okay, I can do this. In the highly anticipated Thinking Fast and Slow, Kahneman takes us on a groundbreaking tour of the mind, explaining the two systems that drive the way we think. System 1 is the fast, intuitive, and emotional. System 2 is slower and more deliberate and more logical. Kahneman exposes their extraordinary abilities and also the faults and biases of fast thinking, and reveals the pervasive influence of intuitive impressions on our thoughts and behaviors, the impact of loss aversion and overconfidence in corporate strategies and difficulties of predicting what will make us happy in the future, the challenges of properly framing risk at work and home, and profound effect of cognitive biases on everything from playing the stock market to planning an expectation. Each of these can be understood only by knowing how the two systems shape our judgment and decisions. There's more in here, but that was the center. The center paragraph. And then let's just do the little thing. Daniel Kahneman is Eugene Higgins Professor of Psychology Emeritus at Princeton University and Professor of Psychology and Public Affairs Emeritus at Princeton's Woodrow Wilson School of Public and International Affairs. He received the 2002 Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences for his pioneering work with Amos Tversky. I guess that's me, right? On decision making. Yes. Good book. Don't pick it up lightly. And before we go, I am going to... So we're going from a 3 book cycle, 3 week cycle, 3 book week cycle, to a 4 book work cycle. So I'm going to recommend a book, but for this first one, I'm going to recommend 2 books. So they'll have two books in the queue, and maybe you only read 1 book a week, or 1 book every 2 weeks, or whatever your schedule is. You can pick one over the next few reviews or whatever, and pick one of those up. Okay, so so I'm going to do 2 books this time, and then the next couple of videos, because I'm doing 3 today. We'll have 1 book at the end. So the first book that I'm actually almost done with is How to Not Die Alone, because I am a sad, lonely person. who needs help. So yeah, this is the surprising science that will help you find love by Logan Erie. I actually only have one recommendation for this, but I never read like a dating book or whatever, so I was like, yeah, might as well. Pretty good so far. Not a review, but that's what's I'm reading now, so that'll be coming up. And then the other one, so we're going to start our cycle of like nonfiction, and then classic, and then like nonfiction, and whatever modern fiction. So it's another one of my backlog of English lit books that I never read. I had like a dozen books from college that I never even bothered reading. You buy them all, and you go to the bookstore, they make it required reading, and you never actually read the books. So, Jamaica Kincaid, I think I actually read a little bit of this book, just enough to bullshit my way through the book report. I think I read like a chapter or two in the middle, and like I broke down one chapter or something like that, analyzed it, like the color red indicates passion. Bullshit your way through the English composition. So yeah, that's what's coming up is Jamaica Kincaid by Annie John. It's a short book, so some of these books won't even take a week to read, so that's the way that you can kind of catch up if you want to catch up. All right, so that's it for this book review. I will see you guys next week with the next book. Bye, guys.